Welcome to Super Wildcard Weekend Fantasy Pros. My name is Andrew Erickson, aka the Props Prophet, and today I'm going to match you my favorite player props on PrizePicks for Super Wildcard Weekend. Look, last week, no sugarcoating it. We were below 500. But we're going to bounce back as the NFL playoffs kick off, and there's no better way to get in on the action than on PrizePicks. Again, if you don't like my plays, you can always check out more player props over on the PrizePicks prop bet cheat sheet over on bettingpros.com. Pulls the plus highest EV plays every single week for every single NFL matchup. Go check it out over at bettingpros.com. Now, time to unveil the top 10 player projections and player picks on PrizePicks for the first round of the NFL playoffs. Jerome Ford, less than 43.5 rushing yards against the Houston Texans. The Browns are going to face Houston for the second time in the first round of the NFL playoffs. Look, it's a tough matchup on the ground, aside from what we saw Jonathan Taylor do to the Texans last week, and I don't want to ignore it. Look, the Browns have also been one of the worst rushing offenses with Joe Flacco at quarterback this season. Weeks 13 through 17, they rank plus 8% in terms of pass rate over expectation. They're second in pass play rate on early downs. Their rushing EPA over that span ranks fifth worst in the NFL. So I'm taking the under, the less than on Jerome Ford's 43.5 rushing yards prop this week. He's still in a committee that's using three running backs between Kareem Hunt and Pierre Strong at this point. He's gone under 43.5 rushing yards in more than half of his games with Joe Flacco at quarterback. He was also held to just 25 rushing yards on the ground the last time he faced the Texans back in Week 16. Same matchup between the Browns and the Texans, but I'm looking at the other running back, Devin Singletary, more than 59.5 rushing yards. It's Devin Singletary's world, and we're just living in it. Well, it's his backfield in Houston at least. Last week, Singletary totaled 23 carries for 64 rushing yards and a touchdown against the Colts, while Dameon Pierce didn't log a single snap on offense. Singletary played 88% of the snaps and also had 3 carries inside the 10-yard line. I love the more than on Singletary's 59.5 rushing yards prop on PrizePicks this week. The Browns defense has been gashed on the road this season, allowing over 120 rushing yards per game. And although Singletary was held to just 44 yards the last time these teams faced off, he only had 9 carries in a total blowout loss. No CJ Stroud in that game either. So trust that in a tighter game, more back and forth contest, Singletary continues to feast as the Texans featured rusher in the backfield. Same offense, but I absolutely love the more than on this receiver. Nico Collins, more than 74.5 receiving yards against the Cleveland Browns. Look, I think that Singletary is going to eat, and I think that Nico Collins is also going to eat in this matchup in the passing game. Look, his receiving yards line is set at 74.5 yards on PrizePicks. Would not surprise me if this number just skyrockets. He hit the over on the first play against the Colts last week with a 75-yard touchdown. He's also gone over this number in CJ Stroud's last 4 games played. And at home this season, with CJ Stroud as his quarterback, Nico Collins is averaging over 100 yards per game at 111 receiving yards per game. Trust in Nico Collins, the yak machine, to get it done and go over his receiving yards prop in the wild card round. Next up, another more than that I like in this matchup between the Browns and Texans, which I think is going to be an absolute shootout. Should be a fun game to watch. David Njoku, tight end for the Browns, more than 59.5 receiving yards. I think this is going to be another big game for David Njoku. The Texans defense is allowing the 5th most receiving yards to tight ends this season at 57.4. And Njoku has been fully unlocked with Joe Flacco as his quarterback. In Flacco's 5 starts, Njoku has a 22% target share, averaging 9 targets per game, 17.1 expected points per game, and half-point scoring fantasy. And even before Flacco got there as the starting quarterback, Njoku had been heating up anyway. Weeks 7 through 17, Njoku ranked first in expected fantasy points per game at 16.8 among all tight ends. Needless to say, he has had the best tight end usage, and the matchup is great for him this week. I know the last time he faced Houston, he only went 6 catches for 44 yards, but he still had 9 targets. I think he's going to get more receiving yards this week in a matchup that the Browns obviously have to win in the playoffs. So I love the more than Njoku's 59.5 receiving yards prop on PrizePicks. Last part of this game here between the Browns and the Texans, I'm looking at the other tight end on the other side of the field, Dalton Schultz, less than 44.5 receiving yards. Given that the Browns are a suffocating defense against tight ends, they're allowing the fewest receiving yards per game to the position. I think the targets are really going to concentrate around Nico Collins as the number 1 threat. Therefore, I'm opting for the less than on Dalton Schultz line set at 44.5 receiving yards. He's gone under this in back-to-back games. There's also a chance that the Texans get back some of their injured wide receivers, taking away targets for Dalton Schultz. Again, last week, Dalton Schultz had one catch in the first half of the game, was not necessarily a featured part of the game plan. He burned me, so I'm going against him this week against the Cleveland Browns and their very, very good defense against tight ends. Moving to a different matchup on Wildcard Weekend, looking at the Packers and Cowboys. Tony Pollard, more than 57.5 rushing yards. Tony Pollard had 17 carries for 70 yards last week, averaging 4.1 yards per carry. Also scored a touchdown, one of his 5 red zone touches. Had a long run of 12 yards on a 57% snap share, but he led the backfield with 10 carries in the first half to Rico Dowdle's 1 carry. Look, we know that Dallas is going to host Green Bay in the first round of playoffs, and we know that Dallas offense at home is an absolute juggernaut. The Packers defense has held up in back-to-back weeks against the Vikings and Bears. Dallas at home, we all know, is a completely different animal. I think they might run wild against the Green Bay Packers and their run funnel defense. Therefore, I'm taking the more than on Pollard's 57.5 rushing yards prop on PrizePicks. He's gone over this last week and in 3 of his last 4 home games. We know Dallas offense absolutely cooks at home. I think that's going to affect Pollard and give him a massive game against the Green Bay Packers. Horrible, horrible, horrible run defense. On the Packers side of things, Jordan Love, more than 248.5 passing yards. We know Dallas is a tough place for the Packers to have to go out and win a road game, but it won't be back for a lack of offensive firepower that Green Bay falls short of the big upset on the road. Ergo, hammer the more than on Jordan Love's passing yards prop on PrizePicks this week. 248.5 yards is just way too low. He's gone for 250 plus passing yards in 7 of his last 9 games played. It's going to be a game where there's going to be a shootout. The total's already over 50 points. It's been bet up in the Dome. I think Love is going to ball out with all of his young playmakers at his disposal. He's going over 250 yards here. So take the more than 248 passing yards on Jordan Love in Super Wildcard Weekend. Last matchup I'm going to talk about here, going to Monday Night Football between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the reeling Philadelphia Eagles. I'm attacking this Eagles defense with their 2 receivers on the Buccaneers. Mike Evans, more than 67.5 receiving yards. Evans was the target leader last week in Week 18. He had 8 targets, but only caught 3 passes for 22 yards. However, he had a massive drop in what could have been a huge passing play downfield. He'll get a chance for redemption against the Eagles in the playoffs. Again, he had 117 air yards last week. I think that foreshadows him as a massive buy low target in the props market. Philly's allowed the 2nd most receiving yards to wide receivers this season. So I'm taking the more than on Evans' 67.5 receiving yards prop this week on PrizePicks. Evans has 70 plus yards in 4 of his last 7 games played. Love Chris Godwin so much in this matchup. Chris Godwin, more than 57.5 receiving yards. Look, the Eagles defense is bad against all wide receivers, but specifically defending the slot, where they've allowed the most fantasy points per game to slot wide receivers, just bleeding points and yards and touchdowns to receivers running over the middle of the field. That's Chris Godwin's bread and butter. Godwin has gone more than 51 yards in 5 straight games with target totals of 11, 12, 11, 5, and 8. I think he continues to feast here as a big piece of this Buccaneers passing game against the biggest weakness of the Eagles, which is their secondary in the slot. Last but not least, Jaylen Herz, less than 237.5 passing yards. Look, the matchup is divine against the Buccaneers' pass funnel defense, but the Eagles have shown me no faith in recent weeks to back them in this spot, specifically with Jaylen Herz as a passer. I can't help but love the under on Jaylen Herz passing yards prop this week. Dealing with a finger injury that could impact his throwing ability. Also, the number is just way too high at 237.5 yards. Hertz has thrown for less than this number in 7 of his last 9 games. Woof. Eagles are going to win, but it's going to be ugly, so I'm going to take the less than on Jaylen Hertz passing yards prop this week. That's going to tie a bow on my favorite player props on PrizePicks for the NFL Super Wildcard Weekend slate. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe, and share with all your friends. And again, be sure to check out the Betting Pros PrizePicks cheat sheet to find more of the highest plus EV plays for every single NFL matchup throughout the NFL playoffs. Good luck in Super Wildcard Weekend.